Hey there everybody, Decaff here with another Blender video for you. Today we're going to begin scratch modeling with my quick and dirty way to just get into scratch modeling and just work on your technique and not really worry about what's going on. We're going to introduce Shutter's method a little bit later, and I think that method, once you invest the time to really prepare it, will work better for you in the long run. So I want you to use this method just to quickly model some things or get some practice with modeling. So what I've done here is I've centered my background image on the origin. You can see it right here where my mouse is. There's the blue and red line going through to indicate the axes, and I've centered the image over the origin there such that I think that that's approximately where the center of my model should be. I mean, that's roughly where the center of gravity is going to be. Maybe it's a little further back, I don't know, but it's good enough for this video. So what we're going to do is add in a mesh. We're going to add in a cylinder with no ends capped, and we don't really need that many vertices. 24 is more than enough. 16 is what we'll be using just for a quick little demonstration. I'm going to bump the depth up quite a bit, and there we go. So we're going to move this in, and I like to just center it on the origin. That's one of the nice things about making our image centered around the model origin, is that we can just snap things to this origin. And then we're just going to rotate this 90 degrees, and we're all set to begin. So let's go, instead of in shaded mode, let's go into wireframe just to begin exploring this, so we can see the background image and our model at the same time. So what I'm going to do is bring out these guys so we're all the way out here, and we're just going to work on the nose section for right now, just to show you some of the things that you're going to want to do. First, we're going to cut this up. We're going to use the multi-cut tool, and we're just going to bump this up to a whole bunch of cuts, give it one good cut through, and then we're going to use these cuts and reposition them a little bit laterally to get ourselves in the right position. So first things first, let's go ahead and scale these guys down. We could actually go ahead and scale them to 0, because this is pretty much going to be the point at the tip of our probe. And we can bring these guys forward, scale that. And one thing to note is that it's really not about precision when you're first starting out. You want to get a rough cut going, a rough outline of your model, get it roughly in the right place to begin, and then you can go in and refine it later on once you are working with a little more detail. So what I'm doing here in this first view is just going and using the regular old scale tool to place and scale our sections here, our little cross-section pieces. Also moving it up and down relative to where the actual image is showing me to place these, because we're not really in depth here. We're not going to go too into detail about all the different pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this section up so you don't have to sit through me working on all the rest of the model. I'll come back to normal speed once we're ready to move on. Okay, now we're back. A couple of things that I wanted to point out at this point is that I've actually gone beyond the marking of the background image. And that's because of the next step when we add in the cockpit area and this vertical, or the top part here. We're going to be using another cylinder to do that, and we're going to scale it and make it fit. But because of the shape, if we look at it from the top and also from the front, it's not coming in perfectly at an edge there. So what we want to do is overlap the bottom section here a little bit to make space for what we're trying to do. So let's go in and add in the next section, and I'll just skip ahead so you don't have to listen to me doing this the whole time. Okay, so now we're back. Quick little note before we begin. One of the things that I like doing is making sure that all the meshes are centered around the origin. So what I did here with this second section that I put in is the origin is still, the center of the object is still at the origin of the model. So if I'm moving things around, I'm only moving them in edit mode. This just makes it so that the model's a little stabler. You can not do this. It's just something that I've found to be a little bit helpful. When you start animating things, having things centered around the origin of the model is a very, very useful thing to have. So one thing that you can see here is that I just roughly went in and did the upper surface. I didn't go ahead and do anything else. So now we can go in and talk about the scaling for other things. Once we've got our vertical side all set, what we want to do is really just play around with the side-to-side thickness of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the top view, and we're going to move the background image such that our nose lines up exactly with this part of the model. So I'm going to go ahead and fiddle around with this. We'll fast forward through this. Okay, so we're back, and I just wanted to point out a couple things. Number one, don't follow your references to the exact line. One example of this is how this guy is slightly angled and slightly offset. I can fiddle around with this a little bit, but it's never going to be exactly right. So we're just going to use this as a brief example. So we are only interested in this portion right here, and the trick with this is trying to get the interface between the two meshes to line up properly. So that can take quite a bit of work and going back and forth with scaling and all sorts of things. But what you want to do if you're going to be scaling is not just use the scale tool. You want to use the scale in the Y direction for this case, because otherwise we're going to mess up our vertical alignment that we spent a bunch of time working on. So I'm going to go ahead and go into wireframe here, And I'm going to go a little bit beyond where all my interfaces should be. So this will be a little bit of scaling in the Y direction out. And it doesn't have to be terribly accurate here, but just to get the general idea. One thing that I might want to do here, because from this side there wasn't a whole lot of detail that needed to be put in on the vertical side, but on the top side we see that our cockpit area is sort of converging back in, and so we might want a little more detail here. So it might be worthwhile to go ahead and do a multi-cut on this section just to give us a little bit more flexibility. It won't change anything on the vertical side, but on the top-down view we'll see a lot more. So when we're going back and forth between the two, what you want to do is be switching between solid and wireframe view. That'll let you see exactly what's going on, and it'll also allow us to see where we need to begin some scaling. So one thing that will be important is to make sure that we interface at the right spot on our mesh up here. So what that's going to require us to do is drag some of these guys down. It'll look a little funny if we do it sort of abruptly, but by making sure that they interface at sort of the right angle, we can go in and keep scaling appropriately. So really the whole idea of scratch modeling is just going in and continually refining your mesh relative to your background image or whatever references you have. So I encourage you to keep continuing with this. If you have any questions about it, go ahead and throw it in the comment section down below. There is a lot of trial and error, so don't be surprised if you're not getting it or if it's really complicated. It took me a long time to begin to figure out what to do here. I'd recommend you go through and read Shutter's tutorial. After I think page 13 or so, it starts getting into the actual physical building of the model. The first 13 pages or so are really just an introduction and a preview of what I'm going to be covering in the next few videos. So I'll put a link to that in the description. Hopefully you have the time to read through it. It's a pretty lengthy document, but it's a really good read.